So I thought it would be worth talking about what you're missing by not being a subscriber to lotuses.com. Now, I know you can think, well, hang on a second, is this going to be like a 10-minute shill? And the answer to that is yes, obviously. But there's a good reason for it, because I think there is actually a teleology to what we're doing here that is quite useful, and it might be worth considering why we're doing what we're doing and what you can gain from it, because it's hard to put into quantifiable terms the benefit that you gain from doing the things that they're doing. But essentially, dare I use the word leveling up, the phrase leveling up, but I think it is important to improve our own thought processes, and that's actually a large part of the work that we're doing, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad you agree. So the book club, it's not by accident the books that we cover in the book club. We actually choose these books for good reasons. I mean, doing the dystopian fiction novels of 1984 and Brave New World are very, very interesting, because the fact that they came out of a time of early 20th century dystopian fiction where Huxley and Orwell were in contact with each other. They were talking about the project that they were working on, essentially the sort of intellectual project that was present in the Anglosphere about, like, look, what is technology going to do to humanity? And they both had two different visions, and it seems that one comes before the other, almost. But we're definitely moving into Huxley's world, given the way the left is going, and given about the permissiveness.
1984 was tried throughout the 20th century.
Yep.
It is still a current experiment in a few countries, let's say. And, Huxley's not been done yet, so let's give that a go.
I don't know. I think Huxley is California.
That's what I mean. It's becoming new.
Yeah, they give the soma to all of the drug addicts, and the way that they view the state and children, as in it's right for the state to take away children, it's fine, all of this sort of stuff. Brave New World is a lot closer to what's actually emerging from the West than 1984, although 1984, of course, is something that's happened in various places and kind of still exists in some places as well. But this is really, really interesting stuff, and it's worth covering through the lens from which we're viewing it. So this also talks about, speaks to other books that we're dealing with. So I've covered Locke's Second Treatise, Bingham's Rule of Law, and Frank de Cotter's Dictators, as well as Zeev Sternhell's Neither Left Nor Right, because the reason this is important is because the Huxley and Orwell, Locke and Bingham are English thinkers. Now, there is a world of difference between the analytic English philosophy and continental philosophy, and it is really self-evident by the time you've gone through Locke's Second Treatise, which is essentially the basis of the American Republic, which is the most successful example of English republicanism, and Bingham's Rule of Law to explain why common law is better than civic law of the continent. And then you get onto Frank de Cotter's Dictators, and then Zeev Sternhell's Neither Left Nor Right, which is an examination of fascism. And you see that essentially all of these things were contained within the French Revolution. And so if you've got an intellectual tradition that is apart from the French Revolution, coming out of the Enlightenment, you get the American Republic, where they believe that rights are constructed within the individual, imbued in there by God or by evolution or whatever you think the creator is. Or you get the continental view, where you think that rights are dictated and created by the state. Now, that's quite concerning, because as the Christian conservatives in America say, the left thinks the state's God, and that actually is, from that perspective, a correct assessment.
Yeah, it's the one that gives you the rights.
Exactly. It's where the rights come from. And the thing is, it also determines the expanse of what rights can be. For example, in the English view that rights are innate to you, that actually limits what rights are in quite a significant way. And it also limits the number of rights that exist to the number of people that exist. So the number of human rights are exactly exact to the number of people that exist. However, that's not the same in the continental view of what rights are. Rights can exist outside of yourself, as in healthcare, welfare, housing, food, all of these things that are not actually human rights. But the English view is the freedom to get these things are your rights, but they're not determined and to be necessarily provided for you.
But also, if the state gives you the rights, they can take them away,
Precisely.
and then they can put the kulaks in the camp.
Yes, and that's how you end up with communism and fascism from continental French thought, and you don't end up at communism or fascism from English thought, and that's just the way it has always been. And that's one of the things that we're going through in the book club, and the things that we talk about in the book club, and the reason we choose these books, which I think is just a really useful thing. And with it being hidden away behind a paywall, it could be that a lot of people aren't aware that we're actually exploring these ideas in depth. Zeev Sternerhol's one was actually really revelatory to me, because I didn't know how much that the French socialists had influenced fascism. Well worth time. But then we also do like a lot of like ancient Greek and Roman thought, like Stoicism. I'm a big fan of promoting Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius' Meditations being one of them. But then going on, right, so we do a lot of interviews as well. So not just with famous political commentators, but also with people like Sebastian Gorka, Michael Malice, and we've got a few others as well, Helen Dale. But also the interviews that we've done, I think, of most value are those people who you might never have heard of. There's a chap called Sheldon Thomas who spoke to Rory about what it's like to be in a London gang. Now, I don't know what it's like to be in a London gang, but I would suggest it's terrifying. And he came out of it saying, well, look, we need to fix this. This is a real problem. And then, of course, you have your interview with a North Korean defector.
I know Josh's.
Oh, sorry, Josh's interview with a North Korean defector. Again, what's it like to be in North Korea? I don't know, but this person does, and you may not be able to find this kind of information elsewhere. So, really valuable. And then you did the interview with the Etonian schoolmaster, Will Noland, talking about masculinity, wasn't it? So he got in trouble for his gender essentialist view, his biologically essentialist view of gender, and saying, well, look, men are physically different to women. There's a biological component to that. Let me explain why.
And that's going to influence culture. That was his argument. That is currently government policy as well.
And it's obviously true.
And that's what led to him getting removed from his school and under suspension until they can figure out whether or not he broke the rules. It was like...
Broke the rules what? Reality?
Literally politically incorrect. That's the thing. Because anything that is politically incorrect is by definition factually incorrect. So you have to, sorry, the other way around.
Factually correct.
If it's politically correct, therefore it's factually incorrect.
Yes.
Because otherwise you just say correct. You wouldn't need the word politically.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. But so these I think are valuable pieces of work that, again, you can't find elsewhere. The next thing is the philosophy work that we're doing. Now, you might think, well, hang on a second. Why do I care about any of this? But the thing is, a lot of the way that the left has been advancing their agenda is because they have sat in academia for literally decades now, philosophizing about how they can change the world. And if you haven't got a clear structure to your thought, then this can easily lay traps for you in the framing of what they do. And so one of the reasons that we've been going through certain specific philosophical concepts is to make sure that you're familiar with them. So because the concept itself is, of course, universalizable. If you see these principles being played upon in other realms, then you can spot how the game is played and you can make sure that you don't fall into that trap. You can get your way around it. And so it was nice thinking about the ship of Theseus problem. Now, this is a particularly interesting problem because one thing that the reason it exists, it doesn't exist in the real world, right? The problem of the ship of Theseus does not exist because the obvious answer, to spoil it, is ancestry, right? At no point has the ship of Theseus not been Theseus's ship. And so even if a bunch of ships are identical to it, made out of the same parts, from the same ship itself after having planks replaced, pop up, they're still not the ship of Theseus. And you can identify it just by the concept of property ownership and ancestry of that. But again, these are things that you will find the left attacking you on. And if you don't have a good answer for these, if you're not experienced in identifying what the problem is, they're going to get you on it. And this is one of the reasons why we do things like this. The other one is, of course, as well, vagueness. Like, you will be called upon by left-wing activists to defend or define specifically a vague concept, which is an oxymoron. The very point of the very nature of a vague concept, it is definitionally impossible to draw a hard line on it. Like, you can't say where a mountain ends. It's just not possible.
So like Britishness.
Put
hard definitions on where Britishness is. Why would you?
Gender is actually the best one for this. Tell me what is and isn't masculine. Well, there is no hard line. And as they will say, there's a spectrum. We know that tomboys are boyish girls, but that doesn't make them men. I can't draw the hard line and say this is where the place. But there's a
and that's fine.
And that's fine. Exactly. We deal with these every day, and we always have, and it's okay to say, well, that's just a vague concept, and you need to know how to defend yourself from being attacked on these grounds. The other philosophical ones we've done loads of these, but like these are the ones that I think are the most important ones, is the ethical knowledge, the thick concepts, and the ethics of social justice one. Now, this is important because the socialists, they have presented an ethical theory, right? It's masked behind an economic theory, but and So laying this out, saying, look, this is our economic theory, therefore it's scientific. No, it's an ethical theory that underlies that. It's all hidden. And this is one of the things that Zeev Sternhell points out about the fascists. And in France, the socialists in France that became fascists, they all understood that, hang on a second, this isn't scientific at all. This is a moral dimension. This is a moral schema for the world. So the Marxists are lying, and they are definitely lying, because ethics is an art. It's not a science. There is no science of ethics, because it's about essentially how you feel about things. And so one of the things that we go through in the Ethical Knowledge, Thick Concepts and the Ethics of Social Justice podcast is how the people who are promoting social justice can fool you into thinking that they have got the right answer for what is bad framing. But you can't spot this framing unless you know what you're looking for and unless you're familiar with these concepts. And so in the Ethics of Social Justice one, we talk about how they devalue the language that they use to put their concepts across, as in to remove any kind of value judgments from within it. You might think, well, that's scientific. It's like, sure, but why would you want a scientific analysis of an ethical situation? What good is that? You need to know right from wrong. You don't need to know like the numbers, the metrics of this ethical system. That's not what you're being asked. And so to prevent this, and this is a key element of left-wing subversion as well. And so to prevent yourself from falling into that, I think these are particularly useful podcasts, especially the Thick Concepts one, which seems to have been remarkably popular because it resonates. Because what it is there are some concepts that can't be thinned out. There are some that are just definitionally thick and have layers to them. And if you start thinning them out, then you start realizing that actually the world the left is going to construct doesn't actually make sense. You know, sometimes reality is complex enough that it demands a concept to encompass everything that is to be a mother. Right? A mother is, say, a relationship to a father, it's a relationship to a child, but it's also a relationship to a biological reality that is being able to reproduce and have children and things like this. And so if they try to thin out these concepts, they can sneak in things.
Birthing person,
exactly. And so it's this kind of linguistic game that you need to be aware of, or else they're going to get you. They're going to slip by you, and you won't be able to tell them why they're wrong. And again, this is why we're doing all of this stuff. We also, of course, have lots of premium articles, which, you know, like Hugo talking about socialism still trying to be scientific, or his Nigeria explainers, or John Tangney, Dr. John Tangney, even though he hates me calling him that, his explainer of the 1619 Project. And again, not just the nature of it, though, but what they're trying to do. And he's absolutely right. They're struggling to wrest control of the narrative of America. And if you let them do it, then they're going to ruin everything. Because believe it or not, these narratives matter. These narratives matter because they inform the decision-making of the people in charge. And if the people in charge make decisions based on the idea that America is a fundamentally evil place, well, that's probably not going to be good for America, is it? So moving on, one of the things I really like about the website is that it gives us the space to do premium podcasts about just random subjects that we might otherwise not be able to put on YouTube. Things like the things Alex Jones will write about, the grimy life of Hunter Biden, where Christopher Hitchens might fall in the culture wars, or your ethical companies one, which is really, really good. In fact, I should have put that in the previous section because the ethical companies one was particularly good, actually. Tell us about it.
Well, it's the fact that companies will come along. Well, you have leftists come along and be like, hey, companies have an ethical duty to climate change or LGBT rights or something else that they've decided is a new buzzword. And it doesn't make absolutely any sense when you look at what a company is for. So a company is there to make money. That's it. As Milton Friedman correctly points out, and we have, is that if you're running a company, say you're the guy in charge of it, and instead you spend $1 billion on BLM, like the billion-dollar companies of the US have done, you've taken that money, you've stolen it from the customers, whose prices you could have lowered for your goods, you've stolen it from your workers, whose wages you could have raised, and you've stolen it from the stockholders, who you could have given back in dividends. You're a thief. You deserve nothing other than hatred. And also the fact that it's
maybe we shouldn't say hatred.
No, I believe...
Contempt.
No,
Contempt
the individual who runs a company and steals money out of the workers who work under him to instead engage in his own personal politics, that is a man that should not be liked by anyone.
It is contemptible, I agree.
But also the fact that it's not new, being that this has happened for a long time with regards to Christianity, for example, back in the guild system.
Absolutely. And so, again, this is all stuff that I think you don't get anywhere else. But I think there are important dimensions to the issues that we're facing that are really worth considering. And another one as well is the demographic trends in the UK. I can't wait for the census to come out because it's going to be a bombshell. and I bet the government is dreading releasing it, because we already know actually what the demographic change in the UK have been. We just don't have the sort of final stamp of the official government data, but we do actually have like secondary indications, such as the ethnic breakdown of primary school students in Birmingham and places like this. We actually already know, because it turns out
Because those numbers are celebrated.
because those numbers are celebrated. But this was a great one, because we just explained, look, the details of what the actual facts of the matter are here. But then, of course, we also have our regular premium content, which is all really good. We've got the Epochs and Contemplations. Now, the Epochs is our history series with Bo. Bo obviously writes articles, but they're all public. But the Epoch stuff, the history stuff is my favourite content, just for my personal nourishment and enjoyment. And I love everything we've done here. We did a 3-part series on the Peloponnesian War and Athens' role in it, and it was great. Everything about this was great. Really enjoyed this one. The fall of Athens was brilliant as well. And then honestly, Alcibiades, and the way that the Peloponnesian War ends, it's genuinely like a movie. It's cinematic. It's epic. And no one knows, because Hollywood's never made a film about it, as far as I'm aware, which is gutting. Because it'd be an amazing sword and sandals film to bring it now. But another one as well was a great one, is The Life of a Roman Legionary, which done from a book that a professor had written, and it was brilliant. Really made me want to join the Roman Legion, because it sounded cool.
True to Kaiser.
No, unironically, though. Unironically. Like, I could see the appeal of it. I could genuinely see the appeal. Not the appeal of getting massacred in battle, because the Romans did lose.
Who signs up for that?
Well, nobody, obviously. But the Romans did lose a lot of men. There was one during the First or Second Punic War. The Romans were like, right, we've got to build a fleet. Great, we built a fleet. Right, send this massive fleet out. And there's just a storm, and 250,000 Romans die at sea. So, oh my God. So yeah, that's what you'd be signing up for. But they make it sound really good in the handbook. And then there's one about Charles Martel, a little-known historical figure that is, without a doubt, the man who prevented Europe from becoming Islamized back in the 8th century. I'm sure he'd be proud of how things are going. Then the final thing we do is premium as well, the Contemplations, which is Hugo and Josh's series, where they just talk about really interesting things. Now, one of the things that Hugo's particularly on the ball about is the UN's common agenda. So there's a lot of picking apart what the UN is doing. And so if you want to be informed on that, and I think that it is worth your time being informed on that, because I mean, I'm not as informed on that as I should be, but these people are doing big things in the background, and they will come to the fore. And so it's worth keeping up on that, as well as just really interesting topics such as the impact of social media on the individual, and how best to even look at and classify our political beliefs. Just really interesting, like deep dives every week into one particular subject, which is really worth its time in and of itself. So so that's our case for why you should sign up to lotuseast.com and support us, because that's how we get paid. You'll notice there's no adverts on the site.
We don't sell you ball and branch sheets in the middle of the podcast.
We've got no brain force or anything like that to shill. It's just the intellectual work that we've done, but we're very, very proud of it. And we think that it will really help you personally if you're politically engaged online and you deal with what I guess we can call the culture war. So we'll see you there.